Righto, here we are. So we've finished chapter 1, the long-expected party. And I just want to have a little breakdown, a little dig into certain things. In this chapter, we're in the Shire the entire time. We're mostly concerned with hobbits. I'm just going to adjust the mic here. That is probably evident to most of you. But I've got some things that I want to share about hobbits in particular. I guess we'll start there. Let's talk about hobbits. So I've got this book here called Hobbits of Tolkien by David Day. It's a wonderful book full of brilliant illustrations and timelines and genealogies and lots of awesome resources. There's this particular passage right now that I'm looking at. It says here, the word hobbit, and that's what I'm talking about now, the beginning of the word hobbit. So the word hobbit was soon to be as much a magical word for Professor Tolkien as hocus pocus was for any fairy tale magician. In fact, hobbit was the most single important word that ever inspired him to invent a story. So I think we all know this, but the interesting part's here. Most authors create characters and then find names for them. But Professor Tolkien's mind reversed that order. He always acknowledged that words themselves that suggested characters... it was the words themselves that suggested characters, creatures, races, species, plots, places, and entire worlds. And then it goes on to say, above all things, J.R. Tolkien was a scholar who studied words, so he's a philologist. He even helped compile the prestigious Oxford English Dictionary. So this was something that I've been interested in a long time, philology, in relation to Tolkien, because it helps him establish a real depth. It's not the thing that helps him establish a real depth. He's obviously also done an extraordinary amount of work in Middle Earth and Arda, as the world is called, across many published works, most of which were published after he died, such as the Silmarillion and the Unfinished Tales and all the histories of Middle Earth, the Great Tales as well. So it's a big place, and so there's all this history, but one of the things that helps it feel so real and so grounded, like there's a depth to it, is this idea that he hasn't just gone and come up with a character, like a lot of other writers do, and then go, oh, what name fits? You know, what name just best? No, he has the name itself. He's a lover of words. That name has come from other languages. It's descended from different roots and beginnings, which is pardon the pun. If you get that, then that's good. But yeah, so for Hobbit, it has a extra little bit about the origins of the word Hobbit. So he came up with it himself. It hasn't been found anywhere else, but there's a lot of kind of connections to it that he delved into to kind of go through that process of finding out, well, what is a hobbit? So a hob, H-O-B, is a fairy or an elf, an imaginary being. All right, so you've got this sense of fantasy already, connected to elves. Hobbits are connected to elves. A hobbledehoy is half human size. So it's like a half man and half boy. So you get a sense of the size of a hobbit. A hob, again, so we've got two versions of hob, but as language you can have multiple words from different places that aren't connected to each other. But another root for hob is a male ferret, a half-tame variety of polecat for driving rabbits from burrows. So you get the sense of burrows in here. Hairy-footed hole dwellers who drive other hairy-footed hole dwellers from their holes. So all of this, you got these imaginary half-sized hairy-footed things, and that's just from like some root words. It goes on to say, where is it here? Hobnob means to drink and gossip together, and hobbity horse is a love of dancing. Hobble is a love of riddles. So these are all from all other different places, but you're getting a sense already that you can see, love of riddles. Bilbo and Gollum in the cave. Riddle games and dancing and drink and gossip. Like, this is all the stuff that we've been seeing in this chapter, right? These traits of hobbits. So that's awesome. that Tolkien can create such a depth through language. I've got a quote somewhere here that I'm sure everyone's heard. I just have to to find it. Here we are. So, and this is a quote from Tolkien himself, which could be found in many places. So you guys can find it if you want, referring to where it all started. So this is Tolkien. One of the candidates, so he's marking essays or exams, had mercifully left one of the pages with no writing on it, which is the best thing that can possibly happen to an examiner. And I wrote on it, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." Names always generate a story in my mind, so we've already dug into a bit of that. Eventually I thought I'd better find out what hobbits were like. That's only the beginning. So, Tolkien himself is saying, I found Hobbit, and then I decided to find out what that meant. I didn't create this race and then call it Hobbit, which is one of the big reasons why I think everyone's just like, there's something really real and almost tangible about hobbits. Everyone finds them really attractive. Here's another cool thing on the topic of hobbits. The evolution of hobbit races across time throughout Tolkien's history is very, very closely linked to that of Anglo-Saxon people, like where they're traveling and whatnot. So we've got like a migration from an original homeland for the Anglo-Saxons, that was the Alps. And from the hobbits, that was the Misty Mountains, the very, very, very early predecessors of the hobbits we're now reading about. And then then a westward journey to a river delta. And the Anglo-Saxons, that was for them the angle, and it's also the angle for the hobbits. So you can see that how Tolkien's matching it there. And again, very closely matched when they journey westward again to a new homeland called, for Anglo-Saxons, the Shires. We all know that Shire is an English word, and it has many other applications outside of Tolkien's world, but everyone's very familiar with the Shire, where the hobbits live. So you've got Shire, the angle, Alps and Misty Mountains, they're traveling. They've even got an original 3 tribes. So the hobbits have the Fallowhides, the Stores, and the Harfoots. We'll hear about that more in the next chapter, Shadow of the Past. But the Anglo-Saxons also have 3 original tribes: the Angles, Saxons, and the Jutes. So this is just further establishing the fact that Tolkien really bases his I guess almost you could say that his imaginary worlds that he's creating are just a product or an inevitable side product of his scholarship, right? It's just all reflecting his scholarship. And a little bit more, even more nerdy, I was just reading through this and I saw a bit about ancestry in the hobbits, and particularly the Tooks. And we've heard about Belladonna Took in The Hobbit. It's one of the first things that happens in the chapter. It outlines Bilbo and Frodo's connection, but also on the other side of this little family tree, we've got Peregrine Took and Meriadoc Brandybuck. We haven't met Peregrine yet. He's been named Pippin, but Meriadoc Brandybuck is Merry, and he gets a few lines. He says, it was a compliment. And so, of course, not true. You get a bit of that. He's helping out. And you also see Esmeralda. Rory Brandybuck is talking to his daughter-in-law, Esmeralda, as they just all sitting there flabbergasted after Bilbo has just disappeared with the ring. He's like, there's something fishy in this, my dear. I believe that old man Baggins is off again, But he hasn't taken the victuals with him, that guy. Well, this Esmeralda he's talking to is actually Meriadoc's mother. So, sorry, that was a roundabout way of just saying that we saw his mother, but I thought it was interesting. So, they're all kind of connected very closely, the Frodo and Merry and Pippin. They're all kind of like cousins in a way on the Took side. Now, there's a bit of a debrief about hobbits, which is the main focus of the chapter, and a little bit about the Shire as well. I want to dig into the chapter itself a little bit, though. I have some fun things to point out. The first is the little passage where the gaffer, so Sam Gamgee's father, is is at the ivy bush, and he's talking to a couple of people, and he says this. He's talking about Sam and Sam's relation to Bilbo. He's in and out of Bag End listening to all the tales. "Elves and dragons," I says to him. "Cabbages and potatoes are better for me and you. Don't go getting mixed up in the business of your betters, or you'll land in trouble too big for you," I says to him. And I just always laugh when I look at this, because obviously if you've read it before, if you've watched the movies, if you know anything about Lord of the Rings, it's essentially 4 hobbits, and this is basically one of the big points. It's 4 hobbits getting mixed up in the business of their betters and landing in trouble too big for them. That's kind of like a massive theme, is that there's these little guys that everyone's overlooked, even the Dark Lord, Sauron, which we'll see in the next chapter. Won't get into too many spoilers. But they're just overlooked by most people except for Gandalf. And all of a sudden, they're the ones on which this, a massive burden carries. And they've landed in trouble too big for them. And it's just very funny because obviously he's just talking about something quite innocent at this stage, which is just a love of elves and dragons and stories, which I think reading this book we all get a sense of. We all have that. We share that with Sam. And also for Sam, I think we get to learn a bit more about his character soon, and we get to see that he really is moved by stories of the elves. They move him in a very, very deep place. And he goes and travels and he sees them. And those are some of the defining moments of his journey, So that I always thought, that stood out to me. Next, we have just a little side reference to Bilbo's walking song, "The Road Goes Ever On and On." This I almost always sing on overnight bushwalks when, you're trudging along and it's just one foot in front of the other. I love walking songs, and Tolkien has quite a few of them. I also use the Misty Mountains, but this one especially, just as you're kind of coming into camp or something and you're weary, got sore feet, it's a really pleasant thing to be able to sing. So that's just a little side note. One of the kind of primary aspects of this chapter, other than Bilbo's disappearance at the end of the party with the ring, is this idea of Bilbo's ring. He has to give it away. He has the whole conversation with Gandalf. After which, he finally gives in. He realizes that he actually really does want to give it away. And after a bit of a struggle, he does, and he leaves. And Frodo comes in, and after a little while, Gandalf gets to get a word in and says, "This ring, be careful with it," and says all this stuff. And Frodo's like, "I don't understand." And this is the part that I'm wanting to talk about. And Wizard says, "Neither do I," answered the wizard. "I've merely begun to wonder about the ring, especially since last night." Blah, blah, blah. This is, you get a sense that stuff is just starting to dawn on Gandalf. He was concerned about it, He obviously is a lore master, so he knows what rings of power are. But there was many, many, many rings of power. Some of them weren't even rings of power. They were just magic rings, essays in the craft. He goes on to say in Shadows of the Past. So they're just experiments almost, like just toying and perfecting the craft. And then the great rings, of which there are 20, have a lot more potency. And at this point, Gandalf has no idea whether this is one of the great rings, whether it's the ring, whatever, or even one of the lesser rings that doesn't really do all that much. But he's just saying, "I've only merely begun to wonder about the ring, especially since last night." And for the next 9 years, Gandalf's going to be going off and finding all out about this. And it's thanks to this moment, I think. This is a defining moment. Elrond goes on to say, if it weren't for Gandalf's vigilance and watchfulness, the fact that he took heed, and his love of the halflings drew him to the right place at the right time. He took heed of the ring, and he endeavoured to find out what it was. If it wasn't for Gandalf, they would have figured it out too late. You'll see in the next few chapters that already that the time is very, very short to do anything about this ring. But if it isn't for Gandalf, and I think if it isn't for this little section here, all would be lost. Because now it dawns on Gandalf, hang on, something's not right here. And he goes off for 9 years. So yeah, that is kind of where the chapter ends. First chapter, and I think it's awesome. So we just unpacked a little bit about the hobbits and Tolkien's love of language, and talked about a little few things. So yeah, go on and read the next chapter, Shadow of the Past, or I'm hopefully next week going to record it, so you can listen to that as well if you'd like. This is one of my favourite chapters. It's only the second chapter, but it's one of my favourite chapters in the whole Lord of the Rings. So see you next week. Badoom.